right, perfect.
Yes, yes, wonderful.
All of our star-studded panelists here and present, and I think you have a very big crowd here today for our guests, who I think we sent you all the map, but are joining us from 11 different communities across the state, and potentially more if we have any of our partners on the line. But we are delighted for this panel, which is the second of the day for all of those that are just joining us, or for our panelists who are joining us for this panel, session number 3 in particular.
Yes, thank you, Nina. So welcome back. And thank you for joining us for this session on board development and capacity building. We developed this session as a response to requests from you, advisory board members, through the survey you completed last year, and from inquiries we received throughout the year from you and your program managers. The theme and topics: how to recruit board members, building a balanced board, how to best structure your board, and how to best manage board transitions are some of the questions we received. To address these, we tapped into Alaska's own talent and expertise and invited 3 individuals who are here with us who bring their unique perspectives to each of these topics and will share their experiences with all of us. But we also want this to be a roundtable discussion. So, and you have experience, you bring experience as well. So if you'd like to share, please raise your hand so that we can call on you. Or if you prefer, send your questions to the chat and we'll incorporate those into the dialogue.
And I would say that in addition to that, I think the questions that you identified, Carmen, are exactly the right ones. But, you know, I think as we evolve as an affiliate program, our board membership evolves, it changes over time. We have different community needs that are changing and evolving. The people who we may need to serve on our advisory boards are changing and evolving. So this will be a conversation that we will have not only this year, but many, many years going forward. And it is a good conversation because I think each of you brings an insight from what you're seeing in your community, and we all can learn from each other as well as from Michael, Lisa, and Robin today. So.
Absolutely. And now I'll hand the mic over to our guests to introduce themselves. Michael, would you start us off?
Sure. My name is Michael Fredericks. I'm here on Denina land in Anchorage, Alaska. I'm at my office enjoying the sunshine on this beautiful Friday day. My father was from the Kuskokwim River, a place called Georgetown, named after 3 Georges. And my mother was from Kansas. I grew up here in Anchorage and have traveled all over the state, working with lots of different profit and nonprofits. I own a small company called SALT, and SALT is a interior design firm, but also I am trained as an architect, but after many years of being in architecture, I got more into stakeholder engagement and facilitation. So that's what I focus on now. So thanks for having me on your panel.
Thank you, Michael. And Robin, would you share a little bit about yourself?
Bet. Hey everyone, I'm Robin Minard. I am the Chief Communications Officer at Mat-Su Health Foundation here in equally beautiful and sunny Wasilla, Alaska, also on the land of the Denina and Otna people. And I have been working here at the foundation coming up on 10 years in July. So I'm responsible for all our communications, advertising, and our public policy work as well, all of our legislative systems change work in conjunction with the program team. And prior to working here, I was a military kid. So I moved to Fort Richardson when I was in high school and went to Bartlett High. And then I moved outside for jobs and came back, and moved outside and came back, and finally I gave up and just stayed here for good in 2001. I worked in publishing, government, at an advertising agency. I was vice president of marketing at a bank. And then I found my forever home, as they say here, at Mat-Su Health Foundation. So really happy to be here and talk to you about working with your boards and new board members.
Thank you. And our third guest, Lisa.
Hello, hi everyone. It's so great to be here. My name is Lisa Aquino, and I am also here in Anchorage on Denina land, and also a golden bear from Bartlett. So yeah, golden bear. I am the CEO of Anchorage Neighborhood Health Center, and I've been in this job a little less than 6 months. And then previous to this, I was the CEO of Catholic Social Services for 7 years. And my background is in public health. So I've served in different public health roles in the state and in different parts of the world. I grew up here. I'm from Anchorage. And I'm here and I hope I can share a little bit about what my experience from those perspectives, and then also from being a board member myself in a number of different boards, and excited to be a part of this conversation. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Lisa.
So Carmen, they're all three being a little bit bashful about their board experience. So maybe you're going to have to expand a little bit about specifically that they're directly the boards they do serve on and kind of some of the expertise that they bring today.
I don't have a list in front of me. Michael, I know that you bring us two perspectives, both coming from the private sector, as you mentioned, and then also you serve on a number of nonprofit boards. Would you care to share with the group some of those?
Yeah, I would. I had the great opportunity to serve on the Catholic Social Services Board while Lisa was the CEO there. So I served a 9-year term and was president for a couple of those years. I took a year off and went right back just because I have a really deep connection. That's probably my most heart connected board, and I'll talk more about that. I'm on the NeighborWorks board as well, and on Foraker's governance board, and also the museum. Anchorage Museum. So, and then as far as nonprofit, and then I serve on one for-profit board, which is Spawn.
Thank you. Just so staying with you, Michael, just talking about all of these boards that you're on, just from a so you serve on a number of nonprofit boards. What do you think about when you choose to serve on a board?
Sure. So my background, as I said, is in architecture, and one of my great mentors besides Lisa here is Carol Gore. And, I started, many of you probably know Carol Gore here in Anchorage. She's runs Cookieland Housing Authority. I started young in my profession working with Carol and her team developing housing, doing design and architecture of her housing units all throughout Anchorage, and really her entire service area. And I'm Alaska Native, and I have this incredible sort of personal drive to help end the experience of homelessness, just because I think it's so incredibly devastating and odd in our first world community that anyone would have to experience that. No matter what the case. So I was really driven to start serving on Catholic Social Services Board because of that deep connection, not only to their mission of, around people experiencing homelessness and issues associated with that, but also because they serve a huge Alaska Native population, and in some cases, some of my own family. So that was what drove me there. And then learning from that board, I really connected the pieces to other boards that I serve on because they support sort of that same mission. NeighborWorks is very much in that home providing business, and they're expanding their work out to Kuskokwim, to the place that I'm from, my family is from. And then Foraker touches so many nonprofits and so many around that same mission of people. So really all of the boards, and then with the museum, they have really gotten into the work of becoming an anti-racist institution and have really put that forward in what they're doing, and I help them with that work initially, and they asked me to become a board member during its implementation. So I really find that board work, I try to take and catalyze the things that I'm good at, which is processes, strategy, stakeholder engagement, and find the places where my heart feels the most connected in order to apply those things. That's really what drives my participation, is that kind of connection to just a deeper individual mission.
Thank you. Passing it on. So in terms of recruitment, we kind of heard from you're looking for things that resonate with your own personal theme, and then using your best assets and how you can help the organization. Passing it on to Robin. Robin, I know you've done some recruitment, made significant strides in building boards that better represent the community they serve. Can you share with us a little bit about that?
You bet, Carmen. Our board is really quite remarkable. We're lucky to have such a strong board, but several years ago, they realized that pretty much we go, we all are comfortable with the people we know, right? So we would talk to our friends and our coworkers and say, oh, so-and-so would be great for the board, but it meant that people were being overlooked that maybe could have a real strong voice at the table. So we made a real intentional effort, the board did, to do very open recruiting, very public recruiting, and then using a matrix, which I'm going to share with you in a few minutes, to identify who's missing from our board, what voice isn't at the table right now, and then to target specifically to some of those individuals. And so I'm going to go ahead and do a quick screen share that my co-presenters were teasing me because I'm the marketing person. Yes, I have a PowerPoint, but don't worry, there are only 3 slides, and I think it'll help illustrate what we're doing. So let me just do a little start share here and turn this into a slideshow. So what I'm going to share with you is once we made this intentional decision, and can you see the slides okay?
We cannot.
No. You cannot. Okay, let me figure out what I did here. Let's see. Screen 2, share. Now can you? Yeah. Oh, I have to, yeah, you can see it now, right? Perfect. Okay. So let me see if I put it in the slideshow, if that messes it up. So I'll just leave it like this. You guys all know what it looks like. So anyway, these are some ads. When we became very intentional, I did a marketing plan, and we did a combination of newspaper advertising, online advertising, radio, and social media. And in the social media realm, we did both advertising and organic posts, just posts on our page. And the results were bigger applicant pools than we had ever seen. And it won't sound like a huge number. I think the last time we did this, we had 38 applications, but that's 37 more than we would have gotten without having done this, probably, right? And it brought a lot of new names, new people to the group. And so these ads that say ready to make a difference, that was just like inviting the public to come forward. And the one on the left there is a newspaper ad. The ones on the right are digital online ads. And what it would do, and it says click to go to the first step. Another thing we realized is that potentially our application process was cumbersome. We had a very long application that people had to download a PDF and fill it in and find a way to upload it. And for some people, that's super easy. For others, it can be a burden. And so we went to an online SurveyMonkey expression of interest format where individuals could just answer a few questions and tell us, hey, I'm interested. I want to learn more. And from there, they would be invited to a full application process. So we made it easier to take that first step and get a foot in the door, so to speak. And so these were the newspaper ads. These were social media ads. And something really cool about social media is, of course, you can very highly target. And so the one on the left is an image of the Matanuska River, and that was targeted just to people who lived in Butte and Lazy Mountain, because we had determined that those areas of Mat-Su were not represented on our board. The one on the right was the Connect Goose Bay Fairview area, that boat that sits, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but that's just like this iconic thing from that part of the borough. And so we targeted actually 9 different areas in the borough, from Talkeetna, Houston, Willow, Trapper Creek. And I could see this working in almost any community, of just like, where do we not have representation? And just on social media, total, we had 156,000 impressions, which means 156,000, not unique people, but people in Mat-Su saw those ads. And there's only 107,000 people here. So of course there's some who saw multiples, but that generated 1,100 clicks on the links, and over 1,000 unique clicks. So over 1,000 people actually got to go through and take the next step, so to speak. So we were really happy with that. It gave us this insight, and it really helped make sure that the geography on our board was diversified. So before I talk about the recruitment matrix, I would love to see if you have any questions.
So Robin, you ran these ads in the newspaper, I'm guessing, and you had 1,000+ unique hits. And how many applications did you actually get?
38.
38.
Mm-hmm.
For what? For one position, multiple positions?
At the time we ended up seating 4 board members. So yeah.
Robin, how did you get the data where you show clicks? Was that built into Facebook? Is it accessible for anybody?
It is. If you have a business account on Facebook, you can go in and track, like, it's kind of scary, everything about everyone. And I mean, if someone, wanted a little bit of help, I could spend a half hour with any of you and kind of show you some of the back end stuff. I've done training for Mat-Su nonprofits on social media, but I'd be happy to help anyone with just a little bit of just the real high level basic stuff, because it is important to know. And then we track it as we go to see, okay, did that lead to anything additional? Where were those people who clicked? And I'm just pulling it up here. Really small communities like Houston and Willow had over 12,000 impressions, and that's an area that's hard to reach. Butte and Lazy Mountain, 14,000. So we think it just really worked by there were all these different ads, and they only populated in those zip codes so that we could have something that they would see as their own.
And using the picture to really connect with the community helped. And then what I really love is on the social media ads, the message feels really sincere. We want to make sure the entire community is represented. It's emotional. You're almost talking to me. So
that's what we tried to do. So thank you. Now I don't have a sample here for you. We also, on our board, we're very interested in younger people serving. So we said in some of the ads that went to all the communities, we're especially interested in people under 40 applying. And there were a few negative comments, people saying that's age discrimination. And we politely said, no, it's not. You're welcome to apply at any age. We're just saying that we would really like to help some younger people become involved in board service. So. All right, I'll go ahead and move on to the next slide if that's okay. We have this board recruitment matrix, and normally it's this long spreadsheet, right? So I had to snip it into little pieces in order to show it to you on the screen here. But you can see, yeah.
Robin, I'm sorry. I'm having a really hard time seeing that. I don't know if there's a way to make it a little bigger for folks.
Let's try. Don't apologize. I want to make sure see it.
It's just so great, and I want to be able to see it.
Yeah. What I can do is send this out because it doesn't have any personal information on it, and I'll walk through it because I'm not figuring out. Oh, how about try Zoom? Oh yeah, it's not letting me zoom any bigger. I don't know why. I don't know if it's because we're on a screen share. Well, let's see. There we go. Is that better?
Much better.
Much better. Yeah, I like much better. Let me make this also full screen. So we'll just go through this in little chunks because of the nature, but you can see on the left, it says board member. And what we do is we list all our current board members there. And then we fill in the boxes. The board fills in the boxes, and the governance committee does this, by the way. I'm not involved in this, but we indicate gender, age range, and race and ethnicity are the first things. And then we go down here, and you can see we rank for what experience they have, and the board had identified these are areas where experience would be really helpful to our board: public health, primary care, other healthcare providers, behavioral health, and I don't want to read them all to you, even though they're hard to read, but we need people who are experts in financing and banking, Alaska Native tribes, government or politics, nonprofit management. So just all these different areas. And then we fill in, do they have some experience? Are they working in the field now, or do they have leadership experience in these areas?
Robin, I think it's a great example of what I think many of us who work with the Mat-Su Health Foundation regularly say, which is you're very analytical about your approach to recruiting new board members and having tools that are helpful in that. I think that you've also shared with us that there's a real communication component to it as well. So I really appreciate your approach to that.
Thank you. Yeah, we try to do everything based on data around here. So thanks for that comment. And then finally, this next section, miscellaneous, just anything in particular that a board member brings that isn't covered in their professional. And you can see here examples: arts, recreation, volunteerism, just things that that person has done. Joint venture, we're a partial owner of Mat-Su Regional Medical Center. So we have that's the joint venture. So we look for people with expertise and interest in serving on that board. And then we get into where they live in Mat-Su. And Mat-Su is really unique. We always, when I first started here, it was like the Mat-Su community is what we talked about. But we've come to recognize over time, there are lots of communities within our community. And I know the same is true in Anchorage, even though it's one city, if you're an East Sider or you're a South Sider, right? And so here there's more, all these different cities, but we just want to make sure that we're really getting the broad range of our Mat-Su communities. And then lived experience is something that a lot of times boards overlook, or they're not interested in that, but we're very interested in people that, you can see some of the ones we identified was a veteran or military perspective, disability perspective, and access to policymakers. And then other examples of lived experience might be someone who's experienced homelessness or someone who's had food insecurity in their life, things that'll help inform our work. And so those are the things. So once this is all done, we'll have our current 14 board members and all these little marks across it. And I can't share that because that would be private information about our actual board members. But you can imagine when you think about that, this is going to show you where the gaps are. So suppose we get this done and we have no marks in the veteran or military column, or there's nobody with Alaska Native Corporation experience. That's what helps inform, okay, here's who we need to recruit when it's time to recruit new board members. And that's where we come up with the Facebook ads and the outreach that's specifically targeted to those populations. I'm gonna stop screen sharing because that's distracting, but I will send that to you, Carmen, and then if you want to share it with everyone else.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, because it's super helpful. And I wasn't in the room when this happened, but Elizabeth, the president CEO, shared with me that when we first started using this, there were people many boards ago who were very uncomfortable with the idea of doing this. And so you may get some pushback from your boards too, because again, as we're all on this equity journey, we're comfortable with people like us. And so to go through and say, well, we're all over 60, we need a 40-year-old, you might get some pushback on that, but that's an area to work on, right? To talk about the leadership of tomorrow. And we found it really helps to look at our census data because we think we're this one homogeneous population, but if you look at census data, you might find, I'm gonna give an example. We were doing a project called Photo Voice where we had these different groups in the community take photographs and display them. And one was Latinx, and someone said, what is that? What kind of group is that? And I said, oh, that's the Latin population, Hispanic population here in Mat-Su. And even though this person was participating in that project, they looked at me and said, well, we don't have any Hispanics in Mat-Su. And the truth is 5% of our population is Hispanic. And so it's eye-opening to look at the data and see where you might have a gap in your board. I have one other thing to share, but
So Robin, can I actually ask that we make sure that we also let Lisa sort of have some time in the introduction too, and then maybe we can circle back and see if there's questions on that.
For sure. Yep.
Yeah, Lisa, we'd love to get your perspective, having been a CEO at Catholic Social Services and where you are now regarding board recruitment and building that balanced board.
Oh, sure. Thank you. And Robin, I thought that was so excellent and so useful. I'm totally going to steal it. So thank you for sharing it. It's great. I am, and I'm here as a CEO of a nonprofit, but I'm also a board member. So I'm on the Providence Region Board for Alaska. I'm also on the Foraker Operations Board. But in the past, I'm the former chair of the Anchorage Coalition to End Homelessness when we went from no staff to staffed, and the chair of the Alaska Public Health Association. So I've had lots of experience working with boards in different ways and seen different examples of balance and structure. I would say that my experience and what I know about is generally as a member of or working with a working board, but I just want to acknowledge and say that there's so many degrees of what a working board means. So like when I was on the Anchorage Coalition to End Homelessness, we had 0 staff. So that meant we did all the work as the board. We did everything. And it was a lot. We granted out, and so we had some similarities. We granted out, $1 million. Like we did a lot and that was in our free time, right? Which who has that, right? So that degree, and then we worked and we got staff, which changes the work, right? All the way to, I would say, to like our Catholic Social Service Board, where it was really about a strategic working board, right? So not in the day-to-day operations, but very much a part of the strategic thinking of the organization and sort of everything in between. Interestingly, my board now at the Anchorage Neighborhood Health Center, it's a requirement that it's 51% at least patients who are the board. So that's interesting, and thinking about how to get a representative group, how do you get, however that representation is defined, how do you ask those people and get them to the table, and how do you connect with them, right? So I would look forward to answering any questions, and I'll tell you, I've made all the mistakes, so I'm happy to talk about any of those. And I feel like I've had all the learning, right? And I figured out a lot of barriers. And I would say, in my experience, maybe the most important thing to remember about boards is that they are volunteers. Boards are volunteers. So unless it's a for-profit board, all of those board members are there because they're passionate about the work that's getting done, right? And so that's what you have in common with them. That's what connects us all. That connects us. It might be that nothing else connects us. We might all be extremely different, but what we share is the passion for the work that's getting done, right? For our community or for this particular work. So really it's like my thinking in my job now and my job at CSS is really how to channel that passion for the organization that they love into work. How do we make those connections, right? Because not every member of the board is going to be passionate about all the things that you need them to do as a board, right? I need them to pass the financials, but that might not be what they love and care about the most. So how do we connect about all the things? How can I talk about the financials in a way that assures that our organization is financially stable and that the board knows what's going on, but at the same time connects with them about why they're sitting there at the table? And really, that's what I think about before every board meeting I go into, before every time that I talk to people on the board, and before, as a board member, right? Because sometimes, I've been in those board meetings that are really painful because they're uncomfortable and we have to talk about something uncomfortable because sometimes we have to do hard things, or boring, right? Let's be honest. Sometimes and you have to get through some of that stuff. And the reason that it matters is because of the passion for why I love this organization, right? Why I love this community. And so I think it's really tapping into that and keeping that front of mind. Those things like sharing a mission moment, that's not just nothing. that is about reminding and tapping into what motivates all of us to be a part of something like this. So I'll let there be more questions, but I just wanted to share some of my thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you, Lisa. Thanks for that passion. And I do see a question. Gail, you've got your hand up.
I do. You were so good at posing that question, Lisa, and I was waiting for the answer. And then you started to come out with that at the end, that we have to tap into that passion and, create situations for, I guess, for our board to remember why they're there, why they wanted to come out in the first place. And I think I kind of have, I guess it's sort of a question. So and a lot of the affiliates are in a very small area. So we're looking at like Robin's numbers in her hits on Facebook. Well, we're not going to see those kind of hits or have that many people to choose from. We're in a town of 2,000. We still are going to have a board that has, maybe you've got a 14-member board. Well, our board is half that size in a community that is a tiny, tiny fraction of that size. So, you've got the 80-20 rule that happens all the time. 20% of the people do 80% of the work. And then the same thing happens on the board. And then we're faced with this, pulling in, are we pulling in all the same people who are already on every board in town? Are we pulling in, trying to get people who are not engaged in other boards, which, gives you the whole burden of training and leading people into being on a board, which is not a bad thing at all, but it's complicated and it's a lot, especially for a young organization. And then how do we balance this desire to have a representative board of our community, whereas we're looking at a lot of foundations are, a lot of boards, the expectation is they're going to be wealthy old people that have a lot of money and a lot of time. And, we want to draw in younger people that have very busy and active lives, but we still want them to be on a working board, which means that, yes, they're volunteers, but their expectation is that they are pulling a lot of the weight of what happens in this organization. It's just such a lot to balance, and we want to do it well. And we just want to hear any practical advice that you can give us, especially if you can come at all to hone your focus down to a smaller place and a smaller pool. I don't know if that's a very clear question. It was just, that was kind
of.
Oh
my gosh. All I can say, I'll jump in first. I bet that Michael and Robin have great things to say about this too. I would just say, I feel you, Gail. Oh my gosh, I feel you. And I can totally imagine the struggle in a very small community and trying to find that balance and that representation. And I think two things. So for me, I appreciated Carmen saying, "Oh, thanks for that passion," right? But for me, that's what I want to tap into when I am connecting and trying to figure out about people to be on the board. It's that their desire to want to be on the board first, because I've found that people that I get to just to fill a seat, to be a box checker, if they're not connected, if they're not passionate about it, and they might not show passion in the same way as me, everybody shows it differently, but if they don't have that belief in the organization, then they're just going to be absent a lot. I don't know if you all have that experience. I do. And so I feel like it's about that connection first, and then what I really task, and it's funny, I just had this conversation with my board on Wednesday night, is that I need the board to those passionate board members to go and talk in the community and talk about why it's important to be on this board in different formats and in different ways to all different kinds of groups of people, so that we can get more people who are passionate about this and that want to come connect. Practical advice, like when I think about smaller organizations like the Coalition to End Homelessness, you know, that was originally made up, that was a members board, right? We were a member. But a part of that, of getting other people, was just like dividing up all the other different forums where we could go and talk about what the Anchorage Coalition to End Homelessness was, and just going to all these different public meetings, going to different sites, going to different workplaces, talking to people who had a job or had an organization where people who are experiencing homelessness were like in the parking lot, and just talking to them and just taking the time to go out and connect people. That's why I was so drawn to Robin's presentation, because it felt like it might make it be an easier way to do that. But in a smaller community, I think you just have to hit the pavement on some level and get out and talk about it. And I will say that sometimes that is, if extroverted isn't your comfort zone, like that sometimes might not be the, like, where you're going to feel the most comfortable, but you can find your way of doing that. But I think you just have to go out and connect with individuals about it. I don't know, maybe Michael or Robin have great things to add. Also, good luck.
I have a few things to add, just from being a younger, I was younger, now I don't feel as younger, but when I started, I was younger.
You're still younger, don't you worry. You're trending young on this call.
It's edging, you know? So I feel like, you know, I got on the Catholic Social Services Board, and that was probably 10 years ago. So I was in my early 30s, and I was sitting amongst like the head of big companies, you know, and I was like, oh, goodness gracious, you know, I was like pretty overwhelmed. And, you know, there was a lot of good training. They were really good at training. And I really feel like I dug in because I had more capacity, and I had more, I mean, I just had the drive and the time, you know, to really dig in at that point. I'm finding I'm getting less and less time to participate as much as I did at that time in life. But I think like looking for the unmined diamonds is a really big and great thing to do, because even if you have to invest in like what their role is, being on a board also creates, it kind of elevates you as a person, because you learn about the inner workings of organizations. So, you know, so many boards are looking, like you said, for the leaders of the organization. And I feel like being on a board creates leaders too. So you have to think of that. Like, you have this great opportunity. I feel like my time on boards has created my leadership and honed it. And, you know, I also didn't know what I was doing and was really open to learning. So I feel like that's something that you could really do, is get to like the unknown people. And I love that Robin is sort of going to the public, right? Because I have every board meeting I've been in about trying to cultivate board members, it's always the same people, and it's the who do we know? Well, who do I know is, you know, the same people that are sitting on all these boards. And I love the idea. I would love if someone tapped my daughters, my younger in their 20s daughters, to get engaged at some level, right? So that's one thing. The other thing that I heard Lori Wolf say recently, who just knows so much about boards, is fill boards not only with the matrix, because I think the matrix is important, but fill them for your strategies. You know, like, where are you going? If you need to, you know, if you're going into big fundraising, or you're going into big DEI work, or you're going into whatever work that you're going to do, just so you're filling who you're trying to find is going to change as you change and your strategy changes. So those are kind of two things that I always think about from my perspective of having this opportunity to be on boards.
It's really good, Michael and Lisa. And I can add just a couple things related. We're right now, the board is creating a board mentorship program, so that when we get new board members, they'll be partnered with a board member who's more seasoned and they'll have a mentorship, kind of a formal relationship to help bring them along. And because it is scary, like Michael said, you're 35 and you're sitting in a room with all the movers and shakers in a community, and you're just like feeling like you're at the kids' table and they invited you to the grown-up table and you don't know how to act. So we think that partnership is, or that mentorship is going to help. And then something else we've done is sometimes if someone's interested in the board and we're not sure they're ready and they're not sure they're ready, is we'll invite them just to sit on a committee, not to actually join the board, but do committee service so that they can get their feet wet and we can learn a little bit about them. So those are two additional strategies to try and bring new people in.
And I might just add one thing from the ACF perspective. You know, we're not, when we're looking for new board members, we have to realize that we're not expected to get it 100% right. And there may be times we ask people in our community to serve and it may not be the right time for them, but they say yes because they have a lot of respect for your organization. And so just being willing to have the conversation with them ongoing of just checking in. Are you still, you know, committed? Your daughter just turned 7 and she's going to preschool or kindergarten this year. Is it still a good time for you? And being willing to have those conversations and being okay if somebody wants to step down for 2 years and return when they're ready to give it more time, and not considering that a failure, but considering that a good step in the communication that you have with your board members.
Thank you. Thinking of the long term, it's a long-term game. It's not necessarily going to have a return on that investment now. Dave, you've had your hand up. Please join in.
So I guess I had a couple of things to say. I've been pretty fortunate and been able to be on a lot of different boards in Seward as well as other communities I lived in the past, or perhaps I'm just a sucker with poor refusal skills. But the two stories that I wanted to relate. So number one, there's really two kinds of groups, and we've really been focused on one of them so far. And I'm not talking about advisory boards and management boards. I'm talking about supported and unsupported boards. And I think one of the best things that the affiliate program has going for us is that the program managers, and having that program manager support changes the way our whole board operates. Knowing that almost all the other boards that I've been on in Seward and in other communities, they're unsupported. So it's a lot more nitty gritty done. And without that program manager support, it does get a lot more onerous on the individual board members. And I think that's really important to find those management supports if it's at all possible. And knowing that so many of these small groups that we interact with, one of our goals at Seward is to not just be the pocketbook. We want to be a resource for our nonprofits in general, and helping them find board members and understand how their board can operate more efficiently is something we want to try to do as time moves on. The other thing I wanted to say, and this is funny with Lisa being at ANHC, I was one of the founding board members of the Seward Community Health Center. And the organization that funds the community health centers has essentially a rubric that they want to see board members representing certain parts of the community. You know, you want to have somebody with some legal background, somebody with some investment background, somebody with, you know, so all sorts of different roles in the community to do that. And I got to go to a bunch of different board trainings through my involvement there. And one of the neatest stories I had was I was in Seattle talking with attorneys and accountants that were also board members for community health centers. And at a board development meeting, this little old lady rolled up in a rascal scooter. And everybody kind of turned and we're like, well, how did you get to be on the board? And she's like, well, I showed up for my appointment one day and they asked me if I was interested in helping to run the community health center. And so many times that's the person that the group forgets about. You know, we have our eyes on these people that carry a specific skill set that might help out the board. But in reality, a lot of the things that we need is just that really meaningful involvement from somebody that just is interested in it. So they don't need to have a background in that area, but hey, I'm interested in the arts, so I'll be on the arts. I'm willing to serve on the arts council, or I have an interest in Little League, so I know Little League gets funding from the community foundation, so I'll be involved in that. They don't need to have a specific skill set. Just being Joe Schmo, I think, is just as important.
Thanks, Dave, and just keeping your eyes open and being more aware of those around us. Thank you. Maureen, you had your hand up as well.
Yes, I was just wanting to mention to Gail, you had mentioned a conundrum we always had, say a population of 2,000 people, and those that were doing the work were already doing the work for other organizations. And this may be a no-brainer to some, but it kind of came as an epiphany to us. We just in this last 6 months or so expanded our thought of not just the 2,000 in our immediate vicinity, but we kind of started looking outside of our local geographic area and worked with a committee, and we decided, like, those not just formerly we only took from our local community, but now those with a express connection, a strong connection to our community. So it kind of opened up a few more thought processes. So we brought in a new board member who has a second home in our community in Talkeetna, but who is a primary residence in Anchorage, but who brought different skill sets that we just weren't finding here in our smaller community. But we put kind of a governor on it in terms of ratios of how many, you know, a primary residence versus, so one person with a primary residence outside our community for a group of 7. If our board expanded to 9, we might consider a couple people. But anyway, it's just a thought, thinking outside of your immediate definition of community. I don't know if anyone else has done the same, but just thought I'd put that out there because it's new to us, and we've got an amazing new board member. So we're really excited about it.
That's great news. Any other comments on recruitment, ideas, strategies, or questions?
Liz has 2 hands up.
Oh, let's do it.
That's because the color of my little hand icon, nobody can ever see it. My tint is off. So I wanted to respond to Gail also. The Chilkat Valley is not much bigger than Cordova. And some of the ways that we've addressed the board recruitment, we get younger people to serve on our committees. They don't have as much time as the older people like me, but they enjoy the committee work. One of the really successful things we've got is that our grant decision committee is the entire board plus 3 community members. And we're very intentional about the selection of those 3 community members. We have found that their involvement in the reading of the applications and the decision, they get very engaged and passionate about what we do. And I'd say our last 4 or 5 board members have come to us as a direct result of having them involved in that. Another thing that we've done is we have some seasonal positions. We have 9 full-time year-round positions on our board, and we have 6 seasonal positions. And so the people that fill the seasonal positions are committing to being on the board at least half of the monthly meetings. And that's let us get the involvement of people who really care about the community, but they don't live here year round, or people who really care about the community, but they travel in and out, or they don't want the commitment of a full 12-month commitment. And it's been a very successful thing for the Chilkat Valley.
What a great model. I'd not heard of that. That's really interesting and good solution. Are there any other comments?
I just want to throw in, thank you, Liz, because that seasonal idea is incredible, because we live in that kind of a town too, just that influx of, we more than double in the summer. And And those people love Cordova just as much as everybody who stays here all year round. They just manage to get out once in a while. But thank you all for your advice and your ideas. It's so great. And I do want to say, I hope it didn't come across as a whiner, because I love our board. It's a wonderful board. And, you know, we just face the things that boards face in little tiny places. Thank you so much.
Oh yeah, these are questions that have been coming throughout the year. I've only been in my position here for just a little over a year. But one of the things I just want to comment, especially to our guests, that so Liz, CBCF has been around since 2008, is that correct? And then Gail, Cordova Community Foundation since 2019. So you can see the breadth of the experience and all the time it's taken to develop that board concept and strategy. So it's really great to see you guys, everybody talking with each other. And we know this has been a really important topic for a long time. So, and will continue to be, as Nina said. If I'm not seeing any other hands up, just gonna move it up a little bit to onboarding. So once you've got a new board member, let's go to Michael. I'd love to hear, just in terms of onboarding, what are some strategies that that you've been part of that have worked in terms of preparing or developing new board members?
Yeah, I have been a part of a lot of really wonderful strategies. The first really great strategy is I've always, lots of the boards I've been on, or every one of them, has really exposed me to the programs or the what they do in several ways. If it's on the ground programs, I get to see them, or just talking with people who, you know, create programs directly. And so I think that's really important, because that is where I connect, is at that level. The heart level for me is the program work. The other really important thing that I experienced with Foraker's onboarding was a meeting with the CFO, like or whomever is doing the finances right off the bat, to just walk through it, because, you know, that finance part is really where all, you know, what is really going on is between those lines, you know, and where you're spending your money. So I thought that was great. And then with NeighborWorks, we also did something with a longer term board member, where I got to sit down and have some time to, you know, just chat with them and understand and ask questions. And, you know, here's the thing though, what I would say about that was, it was at the beginning and I didn't even really know what the questions were yet. So I'd say having that more solidified mentor, not even about age, but about length on the board, where you have regular meetings, maybe once a year, just to ask more questions, you know, would be great for that. And then I will say, you know, when you get to that part about committees and things, and where you see people, I really think diving in or giving them some good time to make those decisions is important. Because one thing that I've experienced is that I get onboarded and I'm immediately shuffled over to the DEI committee, because I'm Alaska Native and I mark that box. But I feel like if you really want me to have power, then put me on the finance committee, or someplace where, you know, I feel like I don't need to be the only person doing that DEI work. I feel like that's everyone's work. So I don't feel like that's as important to fill up with certain people. So that's my only sort of, you know, experience that I've had, that I wish or I'm talking more about, like, nah, I don't really want to do that. I'd rather be over here. So that's sort of my 2 cents about recruitment.
When you're, just to come back to that, Michael, when you're thinking about, we asked earlier, you know, what you think about when you're joining a board, do you ask, you know, what committees do you have before making those decisions? Or
I don't, but I should. I will. I'll start that. I'm learning now. You know, another one big thing about recruitment and then retention too, though, that I'm really learning is I appreciate when boards rethink about when they meet every couple of years, or kind of you know, it's not just this thing set in stone forever, because having smaller children, you know, I can give up lunch hours for some boards, and I can give up, you know, late afternoons for others, but I really don't give up a lot of those dinner time board times. I mean, and that's just because I'm in that stage. Someone said, you know, continue to check in with the stage. Later, I'll give up all of my evenings, you know, but so it just is, it's nice to be able to change that time, or think, or ask the board every couple of years, is this still working? And then I'll just go on and on forever. But the last thing is, do we need to meet every month? You know, that's, I don't know if that's part of your charter or not, but to me, sometimes I feel like there's just a lot more meetings than we always need to have. So being really focused with that is important.
Thanks, Michael. Nina, did you want to speak to in terms of frequency of meeting, or?
Yeah, I think we've, you know, given the guidance to our affiliates that we understand that you guys all have uniqueness, unique opportunities in your communities. Some people, summer is, you know, the time people just are doing their own thing with their families. And sometimes, you know, that's a really wonderful time to meet for others, because people are home visiting back from whatever they're doing in other places in the world. So that we really have given a lot of flexibility. I think what we would say is, there's always a good conversation to go on with your current board about what the right timing is. And they will tell you, I mean, they will tell you, we're meeting quarterly, the ACF board meets quarterly. They say, we do not have capacity to give you more because we are busy. We all have, you know, CEO positions or major community leadership roles, and we can't give you more than that. So we've kind of found the right balance. But, you know, if you talk to Rasmussen Foundation and Alex earlier, they meet twice a year, and that's all the capacity they have. And I know a lot of organizations that meet monthly. So it depends. You got to find your own heartbeat on this one. And the best way to do that is just have really open conversations with your board members about what their capacity is.
Thank you. So in this onboarding and structure and roles kind of question, just wondered, Lisa or Robin, what advice would you recommend in bringing in a new board member, the onboarding process, or if you want to talk a little bit about roles and responsibilities? Either of you, whoever would like to jump in first.
I can jump in if that's okay. We have a formal onboarding process that the president and CEO does. And so it's a series of several longer meetings where she goes through everything that a new board member would need to know. But I think even more important than that is lately we've been really intentional about cohorts. So we had 4 new board members start together. And then for this year, the governance committee discussed, we still technically we have 1 opening, but they elected not to recruit for that 1 opening because then that person would be starting alone. And because of the pandemic, the 4 new ones never really until this last meeting got to sit in a room together. Everything was by Zoom. So we're very intentional about letting the 4 of them learn from each other and support each other. And then in the next recruitment period, we'll have had some people fall off the board due to term limits. So if it's possible, I know a lot of boards are smaller than ours, but it might be worth considering trying to bring 2 on at once. And it depends. I mean, your governance might say you have to have that 1 person, but we're electing to try and let them bond with each other.
That's great advice. Cohorts are great and I think really helpful. And I'll just say a quick thing about roles that I think, you know, the clearer you can be, I feel like, as a new board member is coming in about what the expectation is in terms of meetings and also in terms of committees, in terms of time commitment, in terms of outside of meeting work, great, the best. And, you know, I think it's a key relationship between if there's a staff person and the board chair. And to really, and I found this both from being a board chair and from being that staff person, to really work together to think about defining those roles, and also to help to spread out the work amongst the whole board in the best way that makes sense for everybody there, some people are shyer about volunteering. Some people don't have time to do this kind of volunteering, so it takes some time and some check-ins. You know, it takes like kind of getting to know different board members a little bit, and sometimes that's hard to just do by yourself. But if you have that dynamic duo, and Michael is my favorite dynamic duo partner, then you can think about like, oh, this person always volunteers for everything. Let's in particular sort of help them because they have so much on their plate. Let's kind of find somebody else that can step in for this new thing that's coming on, or support them and they could do it together or something like that. So you're just thinking about and being aware of that, you know. I think that's okay. Like because it's hard to work out all of those kinds of dynamics in the meeting. It's hard to by a group figure all of that out. So if you can sort of, you know, work through that ahead of time, I think it's really helpful. I hope that makes sense.
I might add, I would actually be, we found both at ACF, but also on other national boards I sit on at the Olympic Committee level and others. It's really helpful to be intentional and open with your board members that we're bringing you on for this level of expertise, and just so they know that that's what they can add, and that certainly doesn't limit them because they can do many other things. So, but I would just sort of say we intentionally brought on somebody with communications and marketing and a donor background because we knew we were doing this big donor survey in 2023, and we knew that we were going to need help interpreting that. So. That was an intentional ask, and it was very clear and open. The other thing I would say is it's unique to community foundations, but not unique to Catholic Social Services or any other boards that these individuals serve on, is we have a fundamental requirement that our board is comfortable in some portion of the ask of our donors. And it doesn't have to be the ask that's actually sitting down in front of them. But it has to be comfortable in some part of that fundraising part. And Chris, I'd love to hear your insights on this too from multiple boards. But you know, just being okay with having a conversation doesn't mean you have to go and actually sit down across the pier in your small community and ask them for money. But it has to be that you have to be part of the brainstorming process, or you have to be the person that collectively stands up in a board meeting and says, you know what, as a board members, we can't ask other people unless we all fundraise ourselves, so that everybody can play their own unique role.
I'm happy.
Analyst, go ahead.
Yeah, I totally agree, Nina, and that is something at Catholic Social Services that our board they were a really critical partner in fundraising. They are a really critical partner, and it's interesting. So in the board that I'm in, I'm running now, Neighborhood Health Center. So they haven't historically fundraised, or at least not in many years, because they have a big fee for service line, right? We have billable services. But from my perspective, fundraising is about relationships, and relationships are critical to the health of any organization. And as a board member, we all need to be a part of those community connections. So it's about talking about the organization that you're sitting on the board in, and then potentially also saying, you know, if it's the right moment, or as Nina was saying, any part along the spectrum of, you know, if you're looking for a place to pick, click, give this year, you should really think about my organization. I really love it, you know. Or if that's not where you feel comfortable, it's just answering questions. But I think that every board, in my opinion, those relationships are key, even if you're not fundraising all the time. But I see that by putting it out there and letting their board members know that that's a part of their responsibility is important.
If I could jump in here, Lisa, I appreciate what you said, and I think it points all the more to the reason to have a diverse board. And when I'm saying diverse board, I also mean about political persuasion. You know, even in a small town, We all have our groups of friends that we're comfortable with that might be similar socioeconomics, or they might go to the same church together, or their kids are on the baseball team together or whatever. But it's so important to have that diversity so that you can branch out into those different circles and you have somebody from your board that can reach out to people. And even if it's not to make an ask, like Lisa said, it's to let people know how we're impacting the community. It's just so important. I wanted to also make a comment, a couple comments on recruitment. And one is that a lot of times people just need to be asked. And for us to listen when they talk about themselves and what their interests are. And another thing we need to keep in mind is that our responsibilities change throughout our life. And so, maybe someone hasn't been the super volunteer in the community because they've had small children to take care of, they've had a job, they're a single parent, or they're taking care of parents. I mean, even in a small town, we don't know everything about each other. We don't know everyone's struggles. And those change over time. And so, maybe now that person's kids are grown or their aging parent has passed away, and now they do have the time. And so, don't just rule somebody out because you thought of them 10 years ago when your community foundation was first starting. Things change over time, and you need to look at everyone with fresh eyes.
Thank you, Chris. Something about your conversation made me think about a question that's come up. What if somebody, and this is from an affiliate, what if an application comes in, somebody wants to be on the board, but for whatever reason, the board doesn't accept that person onto the team? How do you address that, especially in a small town, but in any situation? Panelists?
Carefully. It's tricky. I mean, we've had people say, I'm not going to apply unless I know I'm going to get on, because they don't want to go through the process, and it's discouraging and embarrassing sometimes to be declined. But of course, people have to go through the process, and you want to explain to them as much as possible that they, why they were not selected, that they might be an excellent candidate, but that right now we're looking for people with these skills, sort of thing, and encourage applying again in the future. But it is, even in a town, we're not as small as a lot of your towns, but even here, it's hard because these are people you see at the grocery store, and yeah.
Thank you. Dave, you've got your hand up.
So the process that we use is in Seward is we ask each of our board members to come and bring us names of folks that they feel would be a good match for our board, and then discuss them, invite them to come to a meeting, and only after they come to the meeting and understand what's involved do we even give them an application. So we wouldn't let someone get far enough to the point of giving an application if we didn't think it was going to be a right mix. And I think that's kind of maybe a route to take, because once somebody is given an application, there's a kind of an unwritten rule that the application is going to be accepted and they're going to be joined. I feel like maybe that's a Seward specific thing or a small town thing.
Thanks, Dave. Other modes of recruiting? Yes, Cynthia.
A couple of people have mentioned applications. Can they share those with the other affiliates? I don't think we have an application to be on our board. It would be great to see what kind of questions you ask, and just to see what your applications look like.
Cynthia, we have a template, so I'll send that over to you.
Oh,
and
that would be great.
You can customize it for Golden Heart.
Thanks.
Good. Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you, Marco. So let's see, we are at, okay, got enough time. Let's move on to, if we could move on to
Chris, I think Chris has a question.
Chris,
there.
please. Yes.
Sorry, I just wanted to make another comment. You know, we're asking about, gee, you know, how do you turn somebody down? And I think it's important also that once you have your board together, that you do a board evaluation once a year and take the time for your board to reflect on their level of commitment to their job as a board member and really think about, are they doing their job? Are they getting fulfillment out of it? Is the board functioning the way it should be? Because if you have some dead weight on your board, it drags everyone down. It puts more focus on those that are operating at a high level. And I think it's an obligation, it's an exercise that we should go through annually and take it seriously. And Nina had talked about a little bit about having those frank conversations with people of saying, you know, do you really still want to be on this board? We haven't seen you for months. You didn't show up at the donor event. You know, have that conversation with them, because maybe it is a time when they need to step away. And really, it's going to help the whole board, because it takes everyone pitching in toward the same goals to really be successful.
And they're generally very happy to be having the conversation back with you, because they also are feeling not particularly happy with their service. So the conversation usually ends up in a good spot. And I would say, I really like your idea about the evaluation, Chris. It actually is a recommendation. It's not a requirement from the Council on Foundations best practices that you do an annual, a board does their own self-evaluation at the end of each year or whenever it's convenient, but it really is a recommendation. We don't push it down just because we know that we already require a lot of all of our affiliate advisory board members, but if you do ever want the form, we can provide actually a pretty easy self-evaluation form.
Thank you.
Thank you both. So moving on to transitions, I'll put the next question out here. What are some best practices when board members are terming out and new members are coming on? And what is the ideal overlap of these kind of transitions? Lisa?
I can talk about the ideal, but I'll tell you, I don't think I've ever been able to get it right every time, or even most of the time. So I think that ideally, that, you know, let's say a board member signs up for a 3-year term, but, and then they can do 3 of those. That's how it was at Catholic. That's how it is at this board I'm on now. I run now. And every time that their term is up, you're checking in with them to say, do you want to do another term? Like, that's a specific thing. And then if they don't want to, or if it's the end of their last term, then making sure that, like, people know as they're going down the timeline. And then those are the times that you need to, ahead of that, so you need to always have that calendar of people's time on the board. So ahead of that, you can be thinking, okay, we need a new board member. We as a board need to think about filling this space, get out the grid, look at the, you know, look at the kinds of skill sets that you're needing, start talking and thinking about in the community. And I mean, I think ideally you want to be having a deep conversation that's longer about the kinds of skills and representation you want on your board, probably annually, probably as a part of your retreat or something like that. And so, but if not annually, at least every 2 years, so that when these, depending on how long your terms are, you have had that deeper conversation, and then you can touch base on that, you know, quarterly or 2 times a year, knowing that people are going to be terming off. I've never been on a board where yet, but it could be a great idea. I've definitely staffed like this where you try to fill a board seat before the person leaves. I'd be interested to hear if you all do that. I could see the benefit of that overlap and having that kind of partnership, and but I don't know if I've ever been intentional about that. But I think the bottom line is the more intention you can give to it and the more support, I think that the better served you'll be.
Thanks, Lisa. Michael, you're nodding. Did you have anything to add to that?
I haven't experienced that either, where there's an overlap of like the same seat, but I definitely have experienced being on a board where there is a lack of that institutional knowledge because it all leaves at once, and that is real hard. And I've experienced where people don't get off before they, you know, it's clear that they want to leave, but they haven't, you know, so that I've experienced too. So I like the idea of frequently checking in and being really intentional. The other thing is, I like the idea of really empowering the executive committee or whomever to take this on. I am on a board where like the executive committee owns this and they're like crazy about it. And I was like, oh yeah, this is our job, you know? So like not having to put it so much on the executive director and setting that, trying to set that example or reinforce that, I think would be interesting. If I had a board, I'd be like, this is on you, you know, you need to, of course you want to be part of it, but hopefully they can, there's some committee that could take that on. So that's pretty, sitting in my seat, I don't have as much visual of all of that planning, but yeah.
Thank you.
That's really helpful, Michael, especially in the affiliate model where program managers, you know, it's a hard ask for them to go out and be recruiting board members. It really is the job of the board to recruit their own peers. And so it is a really good point.
Good, thank you. And Robin, I know you spoke to cohorts and the formality of how Matsu onboards. Is there an overlap? I guess there is, but go ahead and speak to that, please, if you could.
Well, actually, but there's not an overlap. Like when terms end, when board members are leaving, their last meeting would be our April. We meet every other month, so it'd be their April meeting. Then at the June meeting is when we would seat the new board members. And so they don't actually ever serve together.
Thank you.
We do a recognition for the outgoing board members at that June. It's also our annual meeting, and we recognize them at both our membership meeting and at the board meeting because we want to thank them for their services they leave.
Wonderful.
And maybe I would ask a question to all of our affiliates too, because you guys may do this better than the Alaska Community Foundation is, but we just recognized several of our outgoing board members, primarily because one was Governor Sheffield, and we felt that was a timely thing to do. And the second was Diane Kaplan, who had a really strong impact on us. But while we were recognizing them, I realized that we could be doing a much better job at thanking our board members, giving them small tokens of our appreciation, but also keeping them engaged in the communications and the ongoing donor thought process. And so I would love to hear ideas or strategies for any way that any of our guests or our affiliates really have done a good job at keeping that piece of it, of keeping that outgoing board members engaged.
I'll just go back to something I said when I started, and that is that board members are volunteers. And volunteers are critical to every organization, right? Or at least to most organizations. So I think of like ongoing communication with board members as volunteers, in addition to their role as a board member, but like treat them how I treat a volunteer or a donor, right? They're a donor to our organization. And so I appreciate their time when they've left the board, I still want to make sure they know about all our events, and they get a newsletter, and that, you know, that I see them, and they're still like a key relationship. They can still potentially tell stories for us, even though they're not really a board member anymore. So really keeping them in the fold. I mean, I remember, I think it was at CSS, Michael, like we talked about like, oh, is there like a special group of sort of past board members that we go back to and talk to and use for their experience and for just because they still have the passion about what we do.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. I think there's sort of a fine balance here on. I've now sort of come to the point in my board service where I realize how much work this is for the staff, right? I'm like, oh, I don't want to make a bunch. So we're volunteers, but the staff is also, you all are doing all this good work, and we don't want you just to be managing a board, right? So making like advisory groups and committees and all this stuff can just be like really onerous, right? And so another really cool thing that Foraker did is they assigned a board member. They have a past board list, and they're like, who do you know on here that you would feel comfortable being like their touch point, right? And when we came out with our you know, economics impact study of nonprofits, I had 5 people that I know really well, like that are not just, you know, they're just past people in my life. And I shared it with them. So it was my job, right? As that volunteer. And it was really easy. It was also really cool to be able to reach out to these people because I don't like talk to them every day. They're like, you know, Janie Leask, right? I mean, Janie's in Homer now, but she's like my auntie. So I was like, yay, I get to share this with you. So again, I mean, yes, we're volunteers, but we are volunteers. We've stepped up to be a different kind of volunteers. So put us to work in really meaningful ways like that. And that's such an easy one for me to do at night in front of the TV after my kid goes to bed, you know, is just say, hey, Janie, look at what Foraker's doing, or hey, Bill Allen, you know, I don't get to talk to Bill Allen. So that's my touch point with him. So I thought that was a really cool way to engage people, because, you know, what my coach always says is the easiest clients to get are the ones you already have, right? So the easiest donors to get are the ones that have already been donating, same thing. So treat them with all this special care. It's less work, you know. Don't tell anyone that though outside of this group, okay?
Great suggestion. I love the touch points. On both sides, both people have to be loving that. Janie loves getting the information, and you probably gain, you know, there's all that knowledge from all of her work. That's neat. I just got a note about, we have a request for succession planning advice. So who would like to address that?
I'm sorry, Carmen, a question what?
Succession. Oh,
sorry.
Marco, go ahead, go for it.
Sorry, specifically succession planning for officer roles, so chairs, treasurers, secretaries. Do you have any successful strategies that have worked well for you?
Yeah, try to make sure that the chair stays on a year after they're the chair so they can help the new chair. That's a really, feels really basic, but unless you plan it out, that doesn't happen, and that can be the difference. And then make a space on the executive committee for the past chair. That's going to make the next chair feel more comfortable about being chair as well, because it's kind of scary to volunteer to be the chair. And so that feels like a really basic thing, but it also is a nice way to help. Like sometimes a chair might they feel really passionate about it and they want to hang on maybe. And so it's a nice way to help them transition as well.
Yeah, on some boards that I've been on, the vice chair, you're just told that your next role is the chair, and some boards have not been that way. And I really think that's a good way to do it, because then you're like, you know, you're getting in the chute, you know, and then the keeping on afterwards in a committee role is a really great way. And I think that's an easy way to help people sort of prep and be supported.
Thank you. So we have about 5 minutes before we need to close. Any other?
I had one question for some of the new board members that are on the call that have been recruited to be on their advisory boards recently. Ashley, I'm looking at you in particular, but I think that there's a couple of other on the phone call today. What worked well for you with your coming on to the board, and what was compelling to you to step up and serve your community as a new board member? I'd just be interested to hear what this group collectively did right, and what we could continue to learn from.
Well, my husband actually kind of approached me about it because he had talked with Alaska Community Foundation and stuff, and then one of the Palmer Community Foundation board members was talking to him as well. And my husband said, my wife is actually more active in Palmer than I am right now because he works in Anchorage. And I'm part of the Palmer Lions Club. Sorry, you're going to hear a baby. He's trying to fall asleep.
But Ashley isn't telling you, she decided to be on the board 2 days, joined the board 2 days after she gave birth to her third daughter.
Well, my
third child, sorry.
Yeah. But we went out and Mike took us out for lunch and just talked to us individually about what Palmer Community Foundation does, how they're active, what their role is in the community. And I was already part of the Palmer Lions Club. And I just saw this as another way of being active in something that's going on in our community. And since I have kids, I kind of want to know what's going on and the things that are in the community so I can get them involved as well, because I want my kids to be volunteering and part of stuff. And so I think the fact that he took the time to meet with us individually and really get to know us and talk to us about what they were doing and show us things. And then he invited me to a board meeting, and all the board members got to know me and just asked me questions, wanted to know about my life, those kinds of things, and just really welcome the fact that I had kids and chaos in the background a little bit, because my other two thankfully are off watching a show right now. And we were at the park earlier, but just I like that our community just welcomes people open-armedly and, oh, let's get to know you, and what are things that you did, what did you do for work, and oh, this would be great to plug you in here and do these things. And they already had ideas of where I could be active as a board member. And it makes me want to invite people onto our board as well. I messaged our manager. I was like, do we still have openings on our board? Because I think I might have a couple people who would be great for the board and would bring an asset to this. So.
Thank you so much for sharing. Well, our time has just about come to a close. We'd like to thank you affiliates for joining us today. Presenters, Michael, Lisa, Robin, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us and your experiences. And thanks to everybody for this really engaging discussion.